I'm Dave Loughran with Awesemo.com, and in today's video, we're mocking the entire first round. Here's what I mean. Every year, you're going to pull different positions, whether you're drafting first, 6th, 9th, 11th, or 4th. Whatever it is, we want to put you in a spot that you know exactly what you need to do when you hit that, when you pull that position, and how to set yourself up for later rounds. So let's do it. But before we do, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Let's get it started. All right, so this one is easy, and don't let anyone tell you differently. Christian McCaffrey was the RB1 by a country mile in 2019, becoming only the third player to ever finish with 1,000+ yards rushing and receiving, and also the only running back to ever record multiple 100 reception seasons. He was injured for the majority of 2020, but in the 3 games he played, of which he only finished 2 of them, McCaffrey was fantasy football's RB1 again, averaging 124 yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns, and north of 30 PPR points per game. And in the games that McCaffrey missed, Mike Davis started 12 of them and was the league's RB7 under head coach Matt Rule. Barring an injury, it's so difficult for McCaffrey to fail, given his role in the offense. He's game script proof, and not a single running back in the backfield threatens to steal any work other than more than a couple carries per game, if that. He's the clear number 1 overall pick for a reason. Dalvin Cook finished the 2020 season 2nd in rushing attempts and 1st in rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line. He was also 2nd in rushing yards and touchdowns despite playing only 14 games. So needless to say, Cook was the RB2 on the season and should be drafted as such heading into 2021. Alexander Mattison is a legitimate backup, but he averaged less than a carry per game over the second half of the season when Cook was active, after being used far more frequently to begin the year. Cook averaged 5 yards per attempt for the first time in his career and was second to only Derrick Henry in yards after contact. He may not be the league's preeminent receiving threat, but Cook still hauled in 44 receptions for 361 yards and a score and can surely be effective as a pass catcher too. I would be taking Derrick Henry here in standard leagues, but if I'm drafting out of the 3-hole and PPR formats, it's got to be Alvin Kamara. Kamara was the league's RB1 last year after an insane 21 touchdown campaign and has finished outside of the top 4 at his position in PPR formats only once in 4 years. He never eclipsed 1,000 rushing yards, but makes up for that in spades with his elite receiving upside and massive touchdown share. Kamara has never posted less than 80 receptions in a season and is coming off a year where he accounted for 16 rushing touchdowns and 5 scores through the air. The only caveat to drafting Kamara at 3 overall is the Saints starting quarterback. It seems unlikely at this point, but if Taysom Hill were to start, I'm not drafting Kamara here. He was targeted less than 3 times in a game only 3 times last season, and all of them came with Hill under center. Jameis Winston at quarterback would comfortably keep Kamara as a top 3 pick though. It bears repeating that Derrick Henry in standard leagues is a top 3 pick, and you can make a good argument for taking him 2nd behind McCaffrey. Henry was the RB1 in standard leagues and the RB3 in PPR last year, on his way to becoming only the 8th player in the NFL to ever rush for 2,000 yards. He added 17 touchdowns on an eye-popping 378 carries, but was virtually unused in the passing game. This isn't to say Henry can't get the job done as a pure rusher. He can. The Titans ran one of the most efficient offenses in the league last year, which led to 13 red zone touchdowns and 64 attempts inside the 20 for Henry, while only James Robinson saw a higher percentage of team opportunities inside the red zone. I'm still extremely comfortable drafting Henry at 4th overall, but won't be taking him ahead of Kamara in PPR formats due to the lack of receiving upside, but also the distinct possibility that new offensive coordinator Todd Downing looks to limit his touches after last season, especially now that they've added another alpha receiver in Julio Jones. Tennessee could become more balanced this season, which could directly impact Henry. Ezekiel Elliot endured his worst season as a pro last year, but much of the concern for 2021 is overblown. The Cowboys' offensive line was banged up all season and finished in the bottom half of the league. Dak Prescott's season-ending injury saw him replaced with Andy Dalton, and Dallas was constantly forced to abandon the run given their awful defense and inefficient passing game. Elliott should return to playing in a prolific offense this year with Prescott and the offensive line healthy, which will lead to added red zone opportunities and better blocking. After all, a running back, no matter how talented they are, can only be so effective without a competent quarterback and offensive line. And an example of that Elliott was the RB2 last year in weeks 1 through 5 before Prescott hit the shelf. He still saw nearly 65% of carries inside the red zone last year, but was only able to convert 6 of his 45 attempts into touchdowns. That shouldn't be the case in 2021. And while he's got some mileage on him after clocking 3 seasons of 300-plus carries in 5 years with the Cowboys, Elliott surely has at least one more of those big seasons left in the tank. And I don't see Tony Pollard taking away enough carries to knock Elliott out of the top 5. A healthy Saquon Barkley's workload will be rivaled by very few players in the league, but I can't draft him ahead of Ezekiel Elliot right now. Barkley's coming off an ACL injury that ended his 2020 campaign after only 2 weeks, and there are even reports that he could be limited to start the season. That's less of a concern for me than the Giants' offense, though. Unlike Elliott, who will be operating in the Cowboys' high-octane offense, Barkley will be running behind an offensive line that ranked towards the bottom of the league last year, and will have a quarterback under center in Daniel Jones, who is yet to prove he can competently run an offense. The addition of Kenny Golladay should help, and Barkley himself will surely make a huge impact, but too many question marks remain for him to sneak inside the top 5. Jonathan Taylor turned in a great rookie season, racking up 1,169 yards and 11 touchdowns on 232 carries. He added 299 yards and a touchdown on 36 receptions, too. The final quarter of the season is where Taylor really erupted, though, posting an RB1 performance over the final 4 weeks and capping off his first year with a 253-yard, 2-touchdown performance against the Jaguars. 7th overall seems a little expensive for Taylor, especially considering Nyheim Hines will still be involved in the passing game and Marlon Mack will return from an ACL tear. But there are too many factors working in Taylor's favor not to consider him a middle first-round pick. The Colts ranked 4th in run blocking last year, according to Pro Football Focus, while Taylor had a top 5 breakaway percentage among all running backs with at least 100 carries and the 6th most carries inside the red zone as a rookie. He was the Colts' clear workhorse back down the stretch, averaging 20 carries per game over his final 6 starts, and it's hard to believe Mack's return is going to eat into his production much, if at all. Lastly, Carson Wentz will be in a much less dysfunctional offense and should bounce back considerably from a dreadful 2020 season. It's easy to see why Taylor could be an absolute monster in his second year. Travis Kelce provides wide receiver production at the tight end position. More specifically, a tight end position that is a barren wasteland outside of the top few options. It might feel weird drafting a tight end this early in the draft, but let's consider the facts. Kelce finished 7th in PPR points among all skill players last year and is averaging a stupid 1,327 yards, 102 receptions, and 8.7 touchdowns in the 3 seasons he's played with Patrick Mahomes. In 2020, he was 5th in targets, 2nd in yards, and 5th in touchdowns, and had the league's best quarterback throwing him the football. So while there are plenty of talented wide receivers and even running backs to target in the later rounds, you can't say the same about the tight end position. So at 8th overall, I have no problem taking a player who is in a clear tier of his own at the tight end spot, and it's not even that close. Nick Chubb was the RB4 in the 11 games he started and played to completion last year, and that was with Kareem Hunt being one of the most used backups in the league. Chubb scored in 9 of those games and went for 100-plus yards in 6 of them. His ability to break away from defenses is second to none, with only Derrick Henry finishing with more runs of 20-plus yards in 2020. And he played 4 more games than Chubb. Chubb also led all running backs in yards after contact per attempt. And Cleveland ran the ball at the league's 4th highest clip. So even with Odell Beckham Jr. returning and Kevin Stefanski looking to open up the offense a little bit more, Chubb remains a clear top talent at his position. I'm grabbing him at 9th overall and looking for DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley when the draft snakes back around to me. Tyreek Hill has the best quarterback in the game throwing to him and plays on a Chiefs team that has mowed down opposing defenses for the past 3 years. Hill has been the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 in the last 2 full seasons he's played and has the ability to win weeks by himself. But I don't need to convince you of anything. Hill was 2nd in targets of 20-plus yards last year and 2nd in receiving touchdowns. If you're drafting Hill in the 1st round, you're doing so with confidence that every single week, no matter who the Chiefs are facing, he's going to be a dangerous slate-breaking weapon. Austin Ekeler only scored 3 touchdowns last year, but still managed a PPR finish of RB7 in the 9 games he played to completion. That's what makes Ekeler so valuable. He might not be a perennial 1,000-yard rusher, but he's absolutely dominant in the passing game. And even though Ekeler is never going to see a Derrick Henry-like workload on the ground, he's still the Chargers' lead rusher with no real competition for carries behind him. He averaged 20 looks per game last season, 12.6 carries and 7.1 targets to be exact, and was truly elusive after the catch, churning out an elite 8.9 yards after catch per reception. Honestly, I'm even considering taking Ekeler ahead of Tyreek Hill, because with all the running backs going in the first round, we'll be left with nearly any wide receiver we want in the early second, assuming you want a wide receiver. And they're definitely capable of producing seasons similar or better than Hill. But keep in mind, Ekeler obviously shouldn't be drafted this high in standard non-PPR formats. Let me start by saying this is a tough one. Davante Adams would surely be a first-round pick if we knew Aaron Rodgers was playing, and I have a difficult time putting Aaron Jones in the first for the same reasons. Not to mention, there are plenty of other quality options that you could draft at number 12. But Stefon Diggs is an animal, and he proved it in his first season with the Bills. Diggs and Josh Allen hooked up for 1,535 yards and 127 receptions on 162 targets, all of which led the league. The only category where Diggs wasn't at or near the league lead was touchdowns. But given the lack of depth on this Bills roster, it's hard to believe he can't finish with double-digit scores in 2021. He was still top 7 in red zone targets, ripped off 20 plays at 20-plus yards, and plays for a Buffalo team that was 3rd in scoring a season ago. If you're having a tough time making a decision here, Diggs is easily your safest option. And it's not like he lacks league-winning upside either. Only 5 skill players scored more PPR points than Diggs last year, and only 2 outscored him by more than 10 points. So to recap what we're doing in the first round, it's Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliot, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Kelce, Nick Chubb, Tyreek Hill, Austin Ekeler, and Stefon Diggs. That'll do it for today. Subscribe to the channel for more great fantasy football content, and be sure to head over to awesemo.com while you're at it. We'll see you back here for the next one.